got my giraffe shirt on. I'm so excited. My final speaker is Shana Gavron. Shana is the CEO and founder of Endangered Wildlife OU, a disruptive tech for good fintech specialized in the valuation of individual species of biodiversity. Shana has 15 years of investment banking experience and combines her expertise in financial modeling with her academic background in wildlife management to drive the development of Endangered Wildlife OU's Biodiversity Valuator. And this valuator has now successfully valued over 100 species internationally. She will be telling us more about this financial valuation of biodiversity from mangroves to tigers and how it can help your business. Shana, you're up.
Thank you, Carol. I shall now check, I can share my screen. And let me just see if I can reposition this. There we go. So yes, my name is Shana Gavron. I am the CEO of Endangered Wildlife. And it's very interesting for me to hear my co-speakers discuss the concept of diversity and conscious capitalism and how these should be incorporated into companies. Now, let's go slightly deeper than that, because what we do at Endangered Wildlife is actually look at how to incorporate biodiversity into the corporate and investment decision-making process. Now, we have developed a means that allows you as a stakeholder to actively measure and financially quantify the value of your impact on biodiversity, whether it's positive or negative. And this is something I've personally been working on since 2005, and is a combination of that financial background and conservation background. And I think what really broke my heart was in 2012, a list of 100 species was made, effectively saying that these species could go extinct purely because they do not add value to humans. And that got me thinking. And I thought, who are we actually to decide what lives and what dies purely because what we perceive it creates value? Because surely everything is here for a purpose. So in one way or another, it actually does create a value. And this is what we are trying to encapsulate through Endangered Wildlife. Because, for example, how would you feel if you heard that your favorite animal was going to be allowed to go extinct purely because nobody likes it? I know I personally, I would hate it. And I guess that's partly because one of my favorite animals is actually a very hated animal. But let's just step back from that personal feeling and think about the news at the moment. There's so much tragedy when it comes to stories of climate change and biodiversity loss. And the more we lose, the more impact that we're going to be feeling. We are not immune to what goes on with biodiversity. We are integrated with nature, we're integrated with the environment. But sometimes it's difficult to really comprehend and understand what does it mean if we lose biodiversity. And that's why we've developed this way using big data to help explain the importance and benefit of individual species and to express it in a way that everyone understands. Everyone understands money. But I know this raises a few questions. How do you do it? Is it ethical to do? And what's the benefit of doing it? So let's take it from here and try demystify some of these questions, but by using two of our pilot studies that we've done in Bangladesh covering mangroves and the Bengal tiger. So before we progress, let's just briefly look at how do we value biodiversity. Now, biodiversity in this very sense is diverse, but there's some common factors that are going to come through depending on what species you look at. So we look at bringing together as a large amount of big data relating to environmental and economic factors. We look at things like carbon, because that's what people understand nowadays. We look at aesthetic value. That's effectively a very traditional intrinsic value that people consider. We look at up to 28 different economic values where the species contributes to society. We look at a hedge value, which is effectively how much we'd be willing to pay to maintain a population above a minimum viable population, which below that, there's 95% probability it'll go extinct, or below a carrying capacity population. And just to express that sort of damage that occurs when you go above carrying capacity, I think humans are the prime example. And then what we do is we look at if we were actually able to properly manage or support that population over a 30-year time period, what would that impact be? How will that impact not only the species we're trying to help, but everything around it? And how is that all impacted against things like climate change, changing water salinity? And this is what we bring together to form our value of a species. Now, if you can try remember these colors, because we will use them when I talk about the Bengal tiger and the mangroves. Now, let's try deal with the issue of the ethics of valuing a Bengal tiger or a species in general. Common thing, Bengal tiger is worth more dead than alive. Now, let's just reflect on that one. In the Sundarbans, the Bengal tiger is currently endangered. There's only 114 left, and there's a high threat of poaching. So when it's dead, you're looking at a pelt of about $20,000 to $30,000, each paw about $1,000, and the ground up bones is about $168 a pound. Now, if people are busy talking about how much it's worth dead and the fact that it's worth more dead than alive, why does it become unethical to try and show how much a tiger is worth more alive than dead? So let's look at this. One tiger in the Sundarbans of Bangladesh, okay, doesn't contribute to carbon, zero carbon value. But about 5% of tourists want to see the Bengal tiger. They are willing to pay approximately 625 euros each to go and see that. That translates to about 69,000 euros per Bengal tiger in aesthetic value. The Bengal tiger actually worldwide, the population employs over 50,000 people. So we're starting to look at economic impacts. You've got employment, you've got tourism. Those are the two main ones. And the present value of that is worth about 643,000 euros per tiger. To keep that population healthy and sustainable and surviving, we're looking at a willingness of about 30,000. And the impact of actually maintaining this population for the balance of the ecosystem and for the balance of society is another 100,000. So each tiger there is worth 845,000 euros, meaning that the total population is worth just under 100 million euros. And now you can ask the question, is the tiger worth more dead than alive or vice versa? Now let's look at the mangroves, specifically the Sundari mangroves. Now there's almost 200,000 hectares. You might think that's a lot, but this particular mangrove is endangered. You might wonder why this is endangered. Well, this is the only location in the world where this particular mangrove grows. Now, most people think about mangroves, you'll be thinking about, oh, carbon value, carbon value, carbon value. Everyone talks about carbon value, but there's so much more to it. Carbon value, if we were to take a 30-year contract, you'd be looking at about 550 million euros. That's a big amount, I agree. But there's insurance value attached to that. There's fishing value attached to that. There's tourism value attached to it. This is why we actually need to see beyond carbon, actually see it as a species and the effect that it has as a species in whole. So actually, where you've got the 549 million for carbon, there's almost equal amount at 501 million that is being generated elsewhere. In particular, you'll see under the economic, there's 322 million. That is mostly coming from the insurance that is being generated as a result of its presence. It reduces any flooding or helps reduce the flooding that happens. It's about $250 a hectare per year that is saved as an insurance buffer. Plus, it acts as an important fish nursery, which again is important when it comes to fishing, for subsistence living. So that mangrove population is doing so much more. in addition, by supporting, making sure that that population survives, you're creating another 100,000 euros. So in fact, it's not the carbon value of 550 million, it's the total value of just over $1 billion. That's just for the one mangrove. So you might say, okay, now what's this actually mean to me? So when you think about us as humans and as businesses, as companies, investors, we all relate to biodiversity. We use biodiversity. Biodiversity creates jobs. It gives us natural resources. It gives us insurance. It protects us. It gives us raw materials. We cannot live exclusively of biodiversity. So take, for example, this decision tree I have here as a property development. You have a choice. Choice one, clear the forest, lose the biodiversity, increase your carbon footprint, and you've got an ongoing cost every year to maintain and maintain that property. Choice two, actually integrate a forest into your property development. That way you get to retain the biodiversity, you get to reduce your carbon footprint, reduce the clearance costs every year, and you've now got something that you can calculate an impact return on investment for an investor. And you've got a way of actually presenting to a company or to your stakeholders, whether you're aiming for green consumer or any other stakeholder, saying, actually, this is what I'm doing. I'm not only saving 10 trees, or I'm not only saving one tiger, I'm actually creating for society, for the economy, and for the environment. For every tiger, I help to save 845,000 euros. That is something that is difficult to greenwash, and that is something that is easily understood by everyone you're talking to. So I think what I want to leave you with is essentially that biodiversity valuation has a vast scope of opportunity and is suitable for just about every sector of business when we're talking about corporate sectors. And currently, the planetary changes that are occurring ultimately are going to have an effect on you. There's no escape from that. So we need to actually start working with nature rather than taking advantage of nature. And by being able to understand how we are all directly and indirectly interacting, will allow us to start to incorporate biodiversity into our daily activities and our annual corporate decision-making or investment decisions. And with that thought, I actually want to challenge everyone here to start thinking about this and how they would like to actually account for the impact on biodiversity. And I welcome you all to reach out if you actually want to understand how to start to value your impact and how it could be very specific for your specific case. So on that note, I would like to thank you and as I open a challenge to you.